Hello, my friends. Before we begin, I want to say how grateful I am that you're here with me. Your time is valuable, your attention is precious, and the fact that you choose to spend a few minutes of your day with me, well, it means more than you know. I never take it lightly. Welcome to the 7th episode of Echoes of Curiosity. I'm excited to get my notes together and talk with you this day about a book that I am very, very excited about. This book is called No Bad Parts, and it's by Dr. Richard Schwartz. He's got a lot to say, and consequently, I've got a lot to say. So let's be curious together. I'll be back in literally a second. Every story's inside us. Some of them help us. Some of them protect us. Some of them, well, they're just old. Those stories were written by younger versions of ourselves who were just trying to make sense of the world. And yet, we keep living inside those stories long after life has changed, long after we've changed. Tonight, I'd like to explore how these inner stories get formed and how we can begin to meet them with compassion instead of judgment. The last 2 episodes, I spent a considerable amount of time on A Course in Miracles, or my personal journey with A Course in Miracles. I really enjoyed recording those episodes. It was nice to talk about what I will probably refer to a few times in this episode as ACIM, which is just the acronym for A Course in Miracles. But this book, No Bad Parts, really does, in my opinion, have some beautiful alignments with ACIM, with A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles teaches that perception is a choice, that we see the world through filters shaped by our past interpretations. In a way, for the Course, the ego is the vehicle that becomes the storyteller. And the ego is a narrator of fear. What I really love about this is how beautifully it aligns with internal family systems, again, which is also called IFS, the acronym IFS by Dr. Schwartz. Both ACIM and IFS say that the mind creates interpretations, and it is those interpretations that shape our experience, and that we can choose again. And I think this is where these two meet, in the possibility of a gentler story. I'd like to share the I guess what they call blurb on the back of the book about Dr. Schwartz, and this gives some. I think this gives a good overall idea about the contents of this book. Which, by the way, this book is yet another that was introduced to my husband and I by our meditation teacher, Monse, and I have to thank her for recommending this book and for actually helping me to understand it a lot better than I would have probably done on my own. So thank you, Monse. Let's read this. discover your multifaceted mind. Is there some part of yourself that you wish would go away? Most of us would say yes, whether we call it addiction, the inner critic, monkey mind, neuroses, sinfulness, bad habits, or some other disparaging name. Yet, what if there was a different way to approach these aspects of yourself that leads to true healing instead of constant inner struggle? With No Bad Parts, Dr. Richard Schwartz teaches a revolutionary paradigm of understanding and relating with ourselves, a method that brings us into inner harmony, enhances self-compassion, and opens the doors to spiritual awakening. So this guy's approach is just phenomenal. Again, I think there was a little bit of an apprehension when I first started to understand that there were all of these parts, because it reminded me of what they used to call multiple personality disorder. Of course, it was called a disorder. And he explains that beautifully in here, that this is, of course, it's not that. And he also explains that that's no longer the name of it. It's where I actually found out that it goes by another name today. But in a sense, it is kind of like that, because there are all of these parts that are there, and they do represent us, different parts of ourselves. But these parts were formulated and manifested, I think, all of them when we're at various stages of our childhood and maybe our early adult life. I'm going to stop here for a moment and get some water, and I also want to organize the selections that I plan to share from this book. These excerpts are not lengthy, but they have been chosen with care, and I just want to make sure I've marked them properly. So I literally will be back in a second. In this excerpt from No Bad Parts, Dr. Schwartz explains how he came to learn about parts. In fact, that's the name of this section, How I Came to Learn About Parts. I started out like everybody else, thinking the mind is unitary, and I trained as a family therapist for years. In fact, I have a PhD in the field. As family therapists, we didn't pay much attention to the mind at all. We thought the therapists who mucked around in that inner world were wasting their time, because we could change all that simply by changing external relationships. The only problem with this approach is that it didn't work. I did an outcome study with bulimic clients and discovered with alarm that they kept binging and purging, not realizing they'd been cured. When I asked them why, they started talking about these different parts of them, and they talked about these parts as if they had a lot of autonomy, as if they could take over and make them do things they didn't want to do. At first, I was scared that I was looking at an outbreak of multiple personality disorder, but then I started listening inside myself, and I was shocked to find that I had parts too. In fact, some of mine were fairly extreme. So I started getting curious. I asked the clients to describe their parts, which they were able to do in great detail. Not only that, but they depicted how these parts interacted with each other and had relationships. Some fought, some formed alliances, and some protected others. Over time, it dawned on me that I was learning about a kind of inner system, not unlike the external families I was working with. Hence the name Internal Family Systems. like to talk a little bit about this revelation, I think, that came about as a result of reading this book. I was a very small child, perhaps 3 or 4 years old at most, and we lived on a fairly quiet street in an extremely rural neighborhood in a very small town in northwestern Pennsylvania. And it was a beautiful place. It is still to this day. And we were in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else, of course. And not only that, the parents of this neighborhood, and there were lots of children and lots of parents, lots of families. The parents kind of took care of each other's kids, So kids, including myself, ran around freely in the neighborhood, and we played together, and we just had a wonderful kind of extended family with the neighbors on our street and in the neighborhood. So this particular day was a warm day because people were out. It was sunny. People were wearing shorts, and there were a group of people gathered at our neighbor's house directly across the street. So these neighbors, their names were Pat and John, and a lovely couple. They had a daughter who was my age, and they had other children who were my older siblings' ages. And, we got along very wonderfully with these folks. But, again, I was around 3 or 4, and I saw who I thought was my mother. The woman had her back turned to me, but I was in our home across the street, and I saw this person who I thought was my mother speaking with people gathered on this large front porch at our neighbors, John and Pat Fabiano. And I ran across the street, and I tugged on this woman's blouse, Mommy. And she turned around, and that's when I realized that this woman was not my mother. And as a child, I was shocked, maybe surprised, but I was like, okay, this is not my mom. But the people that were gathered there laughed, and this woman laughed, and something about that laughter triggered something in me, something in the child me, that experienced shame and fear of something like that happening again. And I think I carried that with me for a long time in the form of introversion and being very protective of how I interacted with people. And I think that it also contributed to, at least this is what I've discovered by reading through this material, that I was using other methods and other ways and substances and things to get out of that, to break out of that introversion, and sometimes in very disastrous ways. And all of it was about not feeling ashamed for making some mistakes, some kind of social faux pas, if you will. I think when I realized that that story wasn't true anymore was really through readings through this book and identifying some of these parts that Dr. Schwartz talks about. And that is really very cool. It wasn't dramatic in any sense for me to discover that, but it changed the way I saw myself. It helped me recognize that the part of me telling that story was really just trying to keep me safe. I was just trying to protect myself. That part of me, that child part of me, was trying to protect myself. And there's a lot of spirituality in this book, and I appreciate that. And again, that's one of the reasons why it resonated with me as something that was truly aligned with what I've discovered about ACIM. But there is a part here that speaks directly to this, and I think it's just absolutely beautiful, this passage I'd like to share. Let's pause here to explore the spiritual implications of this discovery. Basically, what I've found is that love is the answer in the inner world, just as it is in the outer world. Listening to, embracing, and loving parts allows them to heal and transform as much as it does for people. In Buddhist terms, IFS helps people become bodhisattvas of their psyches, in the sense of helping each other as each inner sentient being, parts, become enlightened through compassion and love. That's interesting. Bodhisattvas. Wow. The big conclusion here is that parts are not what they have been commonly thought to be. They're not cognitive adaptations or sinful impulses. Instead, parts are scared, spiritual beings, and they deserve to be treated as such. How cool is that? Wow. I encourage reading this book. And there's an audio book that we also got, and actually my husband and I started listening to that audio book together at the beginning, and that was really helpful. And one of the helpful aspects of the audio version is that it was a little easier to use some of the guidance that is presented in this book. And I think it would be fun to even think about doing that right now and inviting you into a very simple practice and thinking about this. When a familiar story comes up, and one that that you've carried around for years, just pause yourself and ask yourself these questions. Which part of me is telling me this? What is this part trying to protect me from? And last, is there a kinder interpretation available? That's where the healing begins. That's where the healing begins, not by pushing parts away, but by listening to them. And again, that's what Dr. Schwartz so beautifully illuminates in this volume that I'm going to keep always with me for handy reference. Going back to ACIM, A Course in Miracles, I think one of the things that it's important to point out for that journey, that continuing journey, is that that wonderful work invited me to question the ego's narrative. this book, No Bad Parts, and its references to IFS. This invites us to meet. Invites me. Let me reframe that. Invites me to meet my storyteller with compassion. That's so critically important. The compassion aspect. It's so it's so what has been missing. Yeah, so what has been missing. So these are working together to lead me back to clarity, to peace, and a more loving interpretation of my life. I can't see anything wrong with that, and I can only see good with it, to be quite honest. So this book has had an impact, has made an impact. This is a moment when my story loosened a bit. Yeah. Something softer came out. I'm still doing this. I'm still experiencing this. And believe me, there are some exercises that have been prompted by this book that have been uncomfortable. I'll admit that. But I think anytime some hard truths are examined in an honest way, it is difficult, and it can be there can be some pain involved. But the end result is really coming to a place of love and embrace. Yeah. I'd like to leave you with this. We're not defined by the stories that we inherited. And they do not only not define us, but they aren't even true. I guess that's the bottom line. They're not true. And another thing to consider is that we can meet every part of ourselves with compassion. We don't have to judge ourselves. That's not what healing is all about. When we let go of some of this, we create spaces for new stories. But these stories can be rooted in truth and in kindness and, of course, curiosity. I'm glad to be on this journey with you. Thank you for being here with me.